And that question to the hiring manager is often is, what does someone bring that we don't currently have in the team? And that could literally be that someone is married with kids. Somebody is into doing gaming.
Today, we are joined by Ollie Sharp, Chief Revenue Officer at Trumpet, and a leader who has played a huge role in scaling teams at companies like LinkedIn and SalesLoft. In this episode, we explore some really important topics for anyone in sales or leadership. First, we talk about the role of mental well-being in sales and how creating a supportive environment can unlock your team's full potential. Then we dive into what it takes to scale a business internationally, both from a cultural and operational perspective. And finally, we discuss the power of diversity, not just in hiring, but in building truly inclusive teams that perform better together. So please enjoy my conversation with Ollie. As I said, Ollie, super excited to have you. Excited because you're coming in with very interesting experiences. I mean, you have not going to say that you are the man behind LinkedIn and the man behind SalesLoft in our region,
no.
but
I wish I was.
That you had like a that would be very pretty nice on your LinkedIn indeed. But no, let's say that you had like a very influential impact on the entrance of those two wonderful companies in our region. And so I would absolutely love to talk more about that, to get your experiences, your challenges, your failures along the way. But maybe before we do it, can you gently introduce yourself? Like, who is Ollie Sharp, so that our audience get a grasp of who you are?
I'm Ollie Sharp. I have been in sales my whole career, starting in door-to-door sales, and then went into recruitment, and then was lucky enough to join LinkedIn early stage, and then went to SalesLoft and currently at Abacum. So I'm a VP of sales. I am very much interested in mental well-being within the sales space, and that's something that drives me. And I always wanted to have a positive impact on the sales arena because I think it gets some bad press. And so, looking at mental well-being and selling with values and ethics is what I like to talk about, but among lots of other things.
That's interesting. Okay, yeah. Can you tell me more about that well-being in mental space? I feel like that's probably going to be a topic on its own, maybe for future conversation. But I'm kind of interested, like, what do you see, what happens, and why that focus of yours?
So it comes from, well, my wife's a therapist, and that helps me a lot. I mean, she's counsels me a lot, to say the least. But also, my wife actually had cancer 7-8 years ago, and it changed the way that I thought about stuff. And I was at LinkedIn at the time, and LinkedIn is fantastic culture and stuff, and the way they look after people. And my boss at the time, Dan Dackham, said, when I said that my wife had cancer, he said, well, she's your priority, look after her. And then next priority are the kids, next priority is yourself. And if you have any time left, do some work, but that's not your priority. And it stuck with me to this day. And it changed the way, having my wife having cancer and stuff, changed the way that I think about mental well-being and changed the way that I think about work. And I think we go to work, and some people bear going to work and going, oh God, I don't like it. And it's not worth it. And to me, I want to enjoy every day at work, and I want to be excited on a Sunday to go into work on a Monday. And it just changed the way I look at it. And I think that I had a bit of an awakening from that, and I want to help other people understand that hopefully they don't have to have the awakening, that it's important to enjoy what you do. So I've always wanted to create environments where I can look after people's mental well-being, make them aware of how important it is to enjoy their job. And it's become very important to me. I've done talks about it and stuff, and it's something that I'm passionate about.
Thank you for being transparent about it and sharing that. I think, especially in sales, it can get mentally very tough. So having someone that is not only aware of it, but really embrace that spirit that your mental health comes before everything else, and you need to be happy at work, is like a tremendous gift inside an organization.
It is, and I think that
sure
it's also about how you manage people, because we're in a pressurized environment as it is. We don't need more pressure, and it's just having that environment where people can be open, not just about their feelings, but about the stress levels within sales, and someone's there to support them. And that doesn't mean that people aren't accountable and stuff like that. It's about getting the right balance, but yeah, it's something that's important.
But do you find it sometimes then a bit difficult to balance out the reality of sales is kind of a numbers game to a certain extent, right? And you need to hit those numbers, otherwise, yeah, performance is not as it should be. But then at the same time, yeah, you need to also be realistic about, yeah, not burning out your people. So how do you find like that sweet spot somehow, or that also might be different for everybody else?
Yeah, well, I'm not for 1 minute saying that give everyone an easy ride. I think it's about being compassionate, being empathetic about the situation. I think that the way I see it is that when I hire somebody, it's a partnership. It's not, okay, I've given them the job now, it's down to them. It's a partnership that is up to me and that person to make them successful. And it's my job to give them the recipe of how to be successful and to keep coaching them and developing them. And there's a book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker that what he talks about is a lot of people think that successful people are happy, but what science proves, and he's a Harvard professor and stuff, what science proves is that happy people are more successful. Our brains work differently and stuff when we're happier. So my argument is, if you can actually drive the team and give them the recipe for success and make them happy, you're more likely to succeed than you are if you're adding the stress levels to them, because we don't think as well when we're stressed, we don't perform as well. So it's logical that this doesn't mean we can't have tough conversations and those kind of things, and we're not that people aren't accountable. It just means that if we are fair to them and we concentrate on their mental well-being and happiness, we will get more from them. And guess what? They'll stay longer as well. And everything works better, in my view.
Do you also tend to think that a lot of people see happiness as a consequence of certain things, right? If this, then I will be happy. Well, maybe sometimes it's about also searching, what you might enjoy that drives then the happiness. And I don't know, do you see that
Correct.
also as something that people feel?
Yeah, 100%. I think people, it depends on what industry and who the person is, but there's lots of people that go to work waiting for their pension and stuff like this. And I was speaking to my wife about the other day, and to me, it's about enjoying the journey, not just looking forward to the destination. And I think that the journey is our everyday jobs, our everyday life. And it's just to be looking forward to weekends and evenings isn't enough. So yes, a lot of people, I think, that are, and Stephen Bartlett in his book and his podcast, he talks a lot about this, about he wanted the fast car, the big house, all of these kind of things. But then when he got it, he realized he wants more. And I think that that's the difference between the destination and the journey.
Exactly. I love that. I absolutely love it. And I'm sure you might actually also touch on it while sharing your past experiences at LinkedIn and Sales Love, because I don't know when exactly that, if I can phrase it like that, emotional scars actually entered your life, but I'm sure that it had an impact. Will have had an impact earlier at your career while leading LinkedIn. Maybe you would have done things completely differently, but nonetheless, I think that you have had like very interesting experience. So feel free to bring them in. Can you please share, anything that you might think is relevant for any go-to-market leader that might listen to this episode about your story at LinkedIn, about your story at SalesLoft?
Yeah, tell me to stop talking. It's a very open question, so to shut me up when you've heard enough. But
I'll probably never stop you, Ollie.
I was in recruitment for 10 years, and I left to join LinkedIn. And when I joined LinkedIn, I was one of the first 14 people at LinkedIn outside of the US. So we were in this very small office on Oxford Street. There was 14 of us. We actually shared the office with some rats. We were going to market, and people didn't know what LinkedIn was. So I was an AE at the time. I wasn't anything to do with founding the business or anything like that. I was quite junior. So it was my first closing role out of recruitment as well. But I was the only AE going to market outside the US for LinkedIn at the time. Everyone else was account management, etc. So that was my role. A lot of it was about working out how we sell, because people didn't know LinkedIn over here compared to the US. And the consistent throughout my career is taking something to market in EMEA. First of all, the US tends to be a few years ahead of EMEA, Europe, UK tends to be second, etc. In buying software, knowledge of it, etc. So I've always had to learn how to take a product to market in EMEA versus the US and learn how to educate on it, because you can't go in going, yeah, LinkedIn, let me explain what LinkedIn is. And you've got to explain it in layman's terms. So I think someone said that you only understand something when you can explain it well. And I think that explaining something in layman's terms is important. That's always been important to me. I moved from AE after 2 years into account management, and then I built a team that was selling to the staffing space. So my first role in leadership was at LinkedIn, and I must say LinkedIn leadership coaching and training was second to none. I look back on it now, and other leaders that I worked with at LinkedIn, they have something called Managing, they have Data Driven University. A lot of the skills I use now are from what I learned at LinkedIn and got trained at LinkedIn. So I built a team there selling to staffing. After 10 years at LinkedIn, I moved on. Selling to staffing was interesting because we were selling a recruitment tool to staffing recruitment agencies that they thought we were the competition. So it was quite a challenging role. And while what I did is I defined the narrative of our go-to-market to talk to them. And we had to do it completely differently to how we're selling to corporate. And I ended up rolling that out globally. It's something I'm very proud of, to actually impact how the US was selling and how other teams were selling. I'd say I left LinkedIn and I was the first person on the ground with SalesLoft. Again, people didn't know what sales engagement was. They didn't know what SalesLoft was. They didn't know. And as soon as you said sales engagement, they went, oh, sales enablement. You're like, no, that's different. So it was very confusing, but it was really enjoyable. And that's what I like doing. So I built that team up to about 125 people in EMEA across all fields. I ended up as the MD for EMEA. And then I left a year and a half ago, I'd say, and now I'm at Abacum. But yeah, there's been a lot of learnings on the way. There's a lot of taking things to market and having to understand how to position things to educate people so they understand it, rather than just sell a product because everybody knows it. And it was interesting.
Yeah, thanks for those introductions. And what I love about this is that in those two different cases, it was about taking something that has worked in the US inside our region. But then, of course, like you said, challenge number one, nobody knew what LinkedIn was. Nobody knew what a sales engagement platform was. So you had that first initial challenge. But then also I imagine that, yeah, once you have that initial, foot on the ground, you have to expand it also, expand the team, build like the processes, the systems. And so what I would like to do with you is kind of understand like what were the different challenges, the different steps that you had to go through in both cases to actually, make sure that those company run successfully.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is easier because by the time I went into leadership and took the product to the staffing market, there was a lot of resource and support around me. I mean, that was when LinkedIn had a foothold in the market. So that was more, the key thing for that was building the narrative. How do we actually explain it so people understand it in layman's terms? And it wasn't selling a product, it was selling a strategy for them. Basically, Recruiter Tool helps people find candidates, but you can also have a careers page or these kind of things. When we went to agencies, we weren't talking about searching. We were talking about, we defined this process of build, engage, recruit, which is build your followers, engage them with content, and it helps you recruit. So we were advising on the strategy that people should follow for them to be successful using social media. And that's what was successful. And then it was how you enable the people to be able to do that, because people will always stick with the old ways, etc. I think what more interesting was SalesLoft, because being the first person on the ground, that was a completely different thing. I didn't have the resource around me. So yes, we had to work on the narrative, the slide where how we sell, but then it was about hiring. How do we hire the right people? And I think when you come to hire something I like, because I spent 10 years in recruitment, hiring technical salespeople, IT salespeople and leaders. So I enjoyed the recruitment side. And one of my biggest learnings in leadership was about diversity within a team. And I'm not necessarily talking about gender, ethnic diversity or anything like that. I mean, they're important as well, because that makes the stronger team. What I'm talking about is cognitive diversity and skill and diversity of skill set. And that, when the first team I built, everyone was very similar to me. And we got to a certain size, and you can't work out why you can't attract people that aren't all the same and stuff like that, because you've got this 10 people that are all the same. And when I built SalesLoft, my priority was to build people with different skill sets. So a lot of people know Tom Boston, Jack Nico, Ellie Twigger, all of these people that work for me at SalesLoft. They were all very different. And if you look at Tom Boston and Jack Nico, they are different ends of the scale, really, but
Very
both
true.
great. They're all aligned on values and ethics, but at the same time, just different skill sets. And I believe that's what makes a really strong team. It's like building a football team just with 11 goalies. It doesn't work. When you've got if you look at your team and you realize you don't have someone that is very analytical, fill that gap. If you don't have someone that is good at a certain skill or presenting or something, make sure you fill those gaps, because they learn off each other. That was my biggest learning, and the thing I would pass on to anybody building a team from fresh, whether it's for an American company or not. But I think that it's very important. And also, go on, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's interesting because we had we've had Jim Rudel. I don't know if you know him, also on the podcast. He used to lead the team at Shopify and now at Mailchimp Intuo. And he was also coming with this concept of culture add, because we are always talking about, we need to find, culture fit, but then actually making yourself very close as a team. And instead you should be looking maybe at how can you add on new elements, new people. And it can be indeed like ethnicity and whatever, but it can also be in terms of skills and experiences, and really creating a very, very diverse team on all different levels with that concept of culture add. So I completely agree with
100%. 100%. And I think that the way that I see it is, if we've got two people at late stages and we like both of them, often the question is, and I regularly use the idea of culture add, not just culture fit. My question to the hiring manager is what does someone bring that we don't currently have in the team? And that could literally be that someone is married with kids. Somebody is into doing gaming. So it doesn't matter what it is, but if everybody does gaming, that's different to some people doing gaming, etc. And just making sure that we're getting a balance, because what happens is you build this initial first cluster of people that if they are too close to each other, then you're taking outsiders in and it's hard for them to settle and belong in your team. The more varied kind of people you take, then you're just filling in the gaps in between, and it becomes one team very quickly. So yeah, it's a big learning for me, and any team I build, I know that I will be looking at the variety of skills and personality traits to make sure that it's as diverse as possible.
I love that. I absolutely love that. No, and I also completely understand that would be indeed like also one of the biggest challenge when you have to build a team like that. A question I asked myself was, the US, plans out to go to the region, and then obviously they come to you, they come to colleagues of yours to build out that team, to build out that go to market and execute on it. But like, how much of it is built, defined beforehand? How much is actually left to you, or how much do they really already have taken under control? What can you share about that?
So again, SalesLoft is the easiest one for me to talk about, just because LinkedIn I wasn't the first person here at SalesLoft. And I think what tends to work well and what happened at SalesLoft is we sat down together and we went, okay. And I did a talk about this at Sastra or Sasta, I can't remember which one, about what you hire first and stuff. And we already had some customers that had been sold into from the US, so we needed CS, but we didn't have enough accounts to have a full team. And we looked at the market and we looked at how quickly we wanted to be ramped. And so when you look at your sales team, you've got to think, okay, how much of it are we getting as inbound? How much do we need an SDR function? How much of the actual leads do they need to be passing? How much of our headcount should be spent on commercial versus enterprise? Enterprise, obviously a longer sales cycle. It's going to take longer to build that. So we, for example, went with a ratio of, I think it was 2.5 commercial to 1 enterprise salesperson, because it will take longer and I could build that later. So a lot of the time, getting the run rate business, the predictable revenue from commercial, while you're building out the way to sell to enterprise and building the pipeline. How do you then serve those people with leads? We tended to use marketing from the US, but we had SDRs over here. And then I was very adamant about the CS side because I didn't want to be going to market saying, we're now in the UK. I'd love to talk to you, and then you sell them a product, and then you pass them back to the US to be helped. So I was very adamant about that. We didn't need implementation here or professional services or anything to start with. We built that later. So we went with a core of SDRs, AEs, both enterprise and commercial, and also one SE to support them, and then one customer success. And I think that was the right way to do it. But then you've got to look at what's the time difference between the two regions that you're in. Atlanta to here was okay. And because we were using RevOps, marketing, all the different things over there, that was for the first year and a bit. Then we built marketing, we built professional services, and built out all of the other teams as well.
All right, gotcha. So yeah, you have that initial idea of what you would like to realize in the market. Then you have the team in the region, mostly then people that will be in direct contact, in direct relationship with the prospect, with the customer, also helping with implementation, but keeping implementation actually for later. And then everything revenue ops, RevOps and marketing, you had the support. When is it then time to actually go and have those extra teams of marketing, of RevOps inside the region? Do you look at certain threshold? Do you look at when capacity is out of control, or what are the signals to look at?
To me, I think it's more about a commitment. I think are we really ready to commit now? Have we proved that this is the right thing? I think that when it comes to CS, we did that from the beginning, and that becomes more of a capacity kind of thing of how quickly you build them, because how many accounts can they manage? I think that when you look at marketing, you've got to look at when does the US team grow enough that they need another headcount that we can actually put over in EMEA as well. But I just think, to me, it's a case of, I think a year in, we're like, right, let's commit now and let's do everything and let's bring the whole team in. We didn't bring the whole lot in. We waited for professional services until later because that was more of an enterprise thing, and enterprise wasn't grown so much. But I don't think it's a sign we've now hit this. I think you can do that as go, what ARR do we need to hit to know that we are building this? And then we fully commit and we bring those people in. I think that is how I would look at it rather than triggers, if you like. But I think it's just a level of commitment that how do we know we've tested it, that we are committing to this and going to grow it? And when that happens, grow it.
I love that. Just, it's indeed just be committed. Yep. All right. So the US, I also presume that the US, they have their way of working, and it works super fine for the US because, it's already a couple of iterations further. They have trial and tested everything. They have that scalability, that repeatability as well. Then they also think that maybe we will just transfer the exact same playbook towards the region, towards the new region, EMEA, and then just hope that or expect that it will work exactly like that. Was it somewhat like that, or did it give you like a lot of freedom and just discover what works best for you, Ollie?
Yeah, I had a lot of freedom. We used sales enablement in the US as well, which meant that we were training in certain ways, but our sales enablement, because it was SalesLoft, our sales enablement were as big a sales nerd as I am. We used to have some great conversations with them and really nerd out about it. So, we can only use them as a resource, but they were open to helping us do it as we needed to. What we realized very early on is that we needed to do more education over here, because over in the US, it was like, I know SalesLoft, you compete with Outreach and blah, blah, blah. Over here, it was like, I don't know who SalesLoft are. And I must say, when I got approached about the role, I had no idea what they are, what they were, or what they did. So that was the market over here at the time. So it's, they weren't. Carl Porter, who's the CEO, wasn't, and the CRO that I started to work for, they let me do it my own way, which was great. I think that they put the trust in me. I think that one thing that I have seen companies do, which I'm not sure I agree with myself, is helicopter someone in from the US as the leader of the business to come and run it over here. Because I think sales is different over here. I think that a sales culture internally is different. And I also think the sales, how we sell is different. I think we're more about building trust and selling with empathy and sort of really building that relationship. Sales is more accepted in the US. And I don't think it works. If you helicopter a US salesperson, should we say, into EMEA, then maybe won't build the right culture and then maybe won't get the same success. And it's like taking a European over into the US. We may not work as well. So Kyle was, and Sean, who was the CRO, Kyle's CEO, Sean was like, yeah, we'll hire someone in country. We'll help enable them to actually do it the way they want to. And they were really good about it. Even later on, when I was growing out the enterprise side, I went to the US and said, look, I want to roll out Medic. And they were like, well, we don't want to, but you can do it your way. So thankfully, they were very open to me running the business over here the way I wanted to and the way that I felt was best. And I think it paid off. I mean, with the Medic side, they actually 9 months later came to me going, how come you've been successful? Then they rolled it out over there as well 9 months later. So it was, they benefited from it. But yeah, but luckily, I've always been given not free range to do what I want, but for free range to do what I want. But they've been open to let me do what I want.
Yeah, but I guess that is wonderful advice for just anyone doing internationalization. You know, with either it's from here to another region, or again from the US to the EMEA region. I think having someone local that has affinity with the culture, that has that cultural touch, is like super, super key. It can be about understanding its customers, but also about building out the team. So I think that is wonderful advice, actually. I want to circle back to something that you said about educating the market, because obviously that was one of the bigger challenge for you during SalesLoft. I mean, you also mentioned it with LinkedIn, but I guess even bigger with SalesLoft. So how do you go about and educating that? Because I can think of, even partnering gap. I mean, you can think of so many things. You can think of social media. You can think of working with communities, thinking of working with opinion leaders, but also even with competition, right? Just altogether working at the education of the market and increasing that pie for everyone as a consequence of it. So I'm kind of curious, about your take on that. Like, how do you go about educating the market?
I think the first step is translating what you do into layman's terms. And I think that it's very important for you to be able to explain what you do so anyone can understand it. That's the first step. And I think once you've done that, you've got to look at the value you drive, because you can, as long as you can explain what you do and show the value that you deliver, then people can understand why that you need to do it. And you need to look at the pain points you're solving. And so I think that to me is the first thing. Hiring people that can also do that. When I was at LinkedIn, one of the interview questions we used to ask people was, explain Facebook to an 8-year-old. And it was a real good part of the process, because some people came in and they'd go, well, it's social media. And you go, hold on, mate, I don't know what social media is. Other people put loads of thought into it. We had a guy turn up with this toy that actually explained it through a toy. And if someone can do something like that, explain Facebook to an 8-year-old, then the chances are they can translate your product in a way that people will understand it. And so that, to me, the messaging and the hiring the people that can do that is the first thing that I would say. Your marketing needs to be right, because I think that marketing, going in with just a brand and the jargon that lots of companies use, isn't going to work, because people, and also that's the same with the actual outbound activities, the SDR, the cadences, the sequences they use. We don't go into companies at Abacum even and just go, we're an FP&A tool, we do X, Y, and Z, because people don't know what an FP&A tool is. They know they work in FP&A. They don't really know what it is. And I'm in the same kind of education phase at the moment. You've got to find the things that they relate to that you solve. So all of your messaging, all of the way you do it has to be just very, very different. And when I was at SalesLoft, we saw a big difference when I started SalesLoft, I think it was in April. Outreach didn't enter the market till October. But when Outreach entered the market, there was two of us educating the market. And Tom Castley built Outreach, I built SalesLoft, and it was good because there was two companies going to market. We were fighting status quo and trying to educate so much. But then when they came in the market, people would start looking at Outreach, do some research and come to us. So there was inbounds coming and stuff like that. So I think that once you start having competition, when you are educating the market, I think it's a great thing. I think that people worry about competition. If you don't have competition, is there a category? And when you have competition, it means that it's a category and it's serious and people will start looking. So you get more inbounds and stuff. Yes, you've got to learn how to beat your competition. But yeah, all of that comes down to how do you educate the market? And I think that it's being patient with the people you're speaking to. And it's hard to qualify quickly because you can't go in going, look, I mean, some companies will say, we do hosting. Do you need more hosting? Do you need anything? Do you need to use hosting? Do you need to renew your contract? No, brilliant. Okay, thanks. It's a completely different way of doing it.
Love it. Having key messaging explained in layman terms, have I would say embrace competition because indeed it will just help the market understand whatever I can actually provide to them.
Yeah.
I want to also discuss about maybe more specifically about your times at SalesLoft. And I guess that during that time you have had different stages as MD of the region. Maybe you can share about that, like what were the different stages? But then in each of those individual stages, what were like the biggest concerns for you? Like what was the things that every week, again and again, you were thinking about, maybe stressing about a little bit or being concerned about better? So that, we can get a grasp of like, what does it take actually to build out such an organization?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, I was very much, is this going to work? That was all that was on my mind. And I was like, this is a big role. Shit, am I up to it? And everything. And that was my stress going, am I up to this role? This is a great opportunity. The market doesn't know what we do. So at the beginning, I was building a team, but did I have confidence that looking back at where SalesLoft got to, if I look at my mindset for the first 6 months, I was like, oh no. So there was that side. Then I think there's growth, and I think there's the balance between growth, just doing growth at the right speed. I remember so many conversations with our CFO and with my CRO about, you've got this extra headcount, and it was either we're not growing fast enough or we're growing too quickly. And it's about getting that balance, because I think sometimes, especially if you have an American company that's been in the market for a few years and their growth has started to plateau, then you open a mirror and they're all of a sudden they're smashing their targets. You can easily drown that growth with too many people. And then you're going, oh, we did it too quickly. But on the other side of it, you can very easily not grow quick enough and then go, we've had a lot of missed opportunity. So I think the next phase from me going, shit, can I make this work, was, okay, what's the right level of growth that we should be doing? And speaking to Chad Gold, the CFO, and going, okay, I think we can go harder than this. I think that we need to go into this region. Once you start to grow, then you've also got to think about what is the best strategy, commercial, and where do we invest? Commercial, enterprise, France, Germany, where do we go, and do we build an office or can we go remote? I think the office side is very much about what are our competition doing? Do we want to be first on the ground? Do we not want to? Because I think that notoriously French people want to buy from French, German want to buy from German, but do you want to put people into those countries to do it? They're often the key markets after the UK. So I think your mindset, once you've looked at, yes, we'll grow, yes, we'll commit to it, is, okay, what is the best way to do this in a sensible way? As in, where do we put people? Do we need them on the ground, etc.? And then once it's got to that stage, then you're thinking more, I was thinking more about, okay, what are the other parts of support that we need? When do we need professional services? When do we need marketing? And marketing, I think, came before the growth, but professional services, implementation, all of those kind of things, and a value engineering team for the enterprise, that was very much at that stage. And I think that's what was that was where my mindset was, because we want to make sure that you're working with capacities and also should you rely on the US a little bit longer, or should 20% of professional services come from US and not overhire, because you just don't want to overhire? I think, and then once you've done that, then I'm sounding like there's just lots of concerns growing a business. These are all things that are exciting at the same time. I think once you've done that, it's okay. How do I continue to build this business as one team? Because most of the time when you've got that initial core, everyone is sales, sales and CS, which are, one step away from sales, let's say. Then when you start building out the team further that aren't sales, and you're used to building a culture that is very target driven and stuff, then you've got to work out how do you retain that culture and make sure that you are one team across a business when you have people that aren't as closely aligned with sales. And that was my next challenge that I had to look at as well. So yeah, there's challenges along the way, but they're the key ones that I saw.
Yeah, I love this. This is super, super clear. And I guess it also makes sense. Maybe to just come back to what you said about that element of speed you had to discuss, right, with your CFO. How fast do we go? Because you don't want to go too quickly, but you don't want to also miss opportunities. How do you actually get a grasp out of that? And then also, how do you look at leading versus lagging indicators? What can you say about that?
Yeah. Good question. I think it's a lot of testing. So, for example, when we're at SalesLoft, the reps could sell anywhere in EMEA to start with. So for you to actually understand the market better and understand the leading indicators, you need all of your systems and your processes set up that you can actually answer questions with data. And so when I was a salesperson, I was the one person in the team that loved using the CRM. I loved Salesforce, and it helped me so much. And the more if you have defined sales stages with gates at each stage, so there's a consistency across the team, and then people are doing things the same way, they're trained the same way, and you're using the data, we can very easily look at, okay, France, what is the win rate? What is the ACV? And what's the main source of where it's coming from? That needs the right technical setup and process and system setup within our business for us to answer stuff with data. And I think that's what it's all about. I think a lot of companies not a lot of companies, some companies may not realize the importance of consistent processes and structures to provide data that 2 years down the line, if you put it in then, it's too late, because you want the data from the last 2 years. And I think that is key. And I think when it comes to leading and lagging indicators, they're so important. We think about the lagging indicators, the ARR and stuff, but the more data we have, the more we can deal with the leading indicators. And I know that when I was dealing with the cross-functional leaders outside of sales, I always knew in and out of sales, I used to have at least 2 leading and 2 lagging indicators that were the core of our conversations in the one-to-ones. We'd always look at them, whether it was CS, SDR leader, or whoever. We would look at at least 2 leading, 2 lagging, and then the result side as well. And that would help us manage the business. Then if there was a red alert on anything, there was something that was too low or too high, we would dig deeper and go into further data. But I think it's important to be very intentional about, this is a leading indicator that we will track. It's not something you look at once a month or once a quarter. It's something you look at in your one-to-ones to give you the early warning system that something is going to go wrong.
Right. 2 leading, 2 lagging indicators with every one-on-one. Was it then always the same leading and lagging indicator for just everyone in the team?
I'm talking about with leaders. So like when I'm talking more about as a regional leader working with the person that leads CS, the person that leads professional services, the leader of sales. So I'm talking more about one-to-ones with the leaders of each. But I think that, when you're managing SDRs, it normally is the same, because the leading ones will normally be activity and quality sort of thing.
That makes sense.
So they would be set. They may have different targets with each of them, but you would track the same things. But with leaders of each line of business, it would always be different leading and lagging indicators.
Gotcha. All right. And so you mentioned the many different things that you had to do and had to go through, like the different stages inside the company. And to me, it sounded a lot like, all right, you have to put a lot of processes in place, but there is also a lot of decision making in place. But obviously, you also have to build out a team that maybe takes fully ownership out of that, or partly ownership out of it. So to me, I also wondered, like, how much of it becomes it a people oriented activity, or like a process design type of activity in your role at the time?
I think it's a mix. And I think that it's one thing that I learned well at LinkedIn is how to stand back and build a framework from something. And I think that, like, when we think about the way we do things, it's often very situational. I did this in this situation. If you can stand back and go, okay, what's the framework I used in that situation that I can use across different situations? And I think that helps with more of the process side and working out. As a leader, I think that the role should be that I am involved in lots of meetings, but I'm not doing the most talking. I'm just guiding the conversation with frameworks to get what everyone else wants from whatever we're trying to solve. And I think that, when I first went into leadership, I thought I knew the answer to everything. I was the person going, no, I don't need to listen to anyone. I've got all the answers and stuff like that. And that's not leadership whatsoever. And that didn't last long, I promise, and I've changed. But I think that going into a meeting to work on the project of X, whatever it is, to ask the questions, it's very much like coaching rather than telling, to ask the questions that's guiding the conversation, that we come out with the right solution is the right thing. And I think that to add to that, if you balance that with, when you build a team, having everyone in the same boat. And this is something that I'm really sort of passionate about. I think that, like, even being able to, when you hire a team, make sure everyone has equity in the company. It's about having that purpose as a business. And if you look at Ikigai, Ikigai is Japanese, about having a job where you have purpose and you enjoy everything, enjoy what you do. It doesn't become a job anymore. If you provide, as a leader, if you provide that purpose and you get everyone in that boat with you, then it's a lot easier journey. Because if you can go to a meeting and go, right, today we're going to look at X, let's all discuss that, and everybody has the same end goal, and people aren't going, this isn't my job, it makes a huge difference. So being able to me, the leader adds the structure and asks the questions to get to the right destination, and gets the team on board as followers to help get to that destination. It makes your life a lot easier than just doing everything yourself.
I love this. And I think you immediately also answered my follow-up question, because I also wanted to ask you about the culture. You mentioned it. It was something that, eventually took like most of your attention. I can also imagine that happens when the organization gets like at a certain size, especially also if it's geographically expanded. You still need to have like that one cohesive team. So I assume that to have that purpose as a business, to have that Ikigai inside the organization, was kind of a way to navigate that culture building and ensuring that that you keep fostering it inside the organization. But where like the other things that you can think of that really helped you shape but also sustain that culture inside the organization?
Do you know what? I think it's a balance of lots of things. And culture is something that I am very, very proud of at SalesLoft. I learned a lot at LinkedIn about culture. And when I was in recruitment, I saw so many people leaving companies because of culture. And they'd say, I went to the interview, they talked about culture, it was written on the wall, and nothing ever came of it and stuff. And when I joined LinkedIn, I thought, is it going to be the same? But no, exactly. A ping pong table and written on the wall. And LinkedIn was fantastic. The culture there, that you had Mike Gamps and Jeff Weiner on stage talking about the culture and the values, and with passion. So I had good learnings there. And then at SalesLoft, I think that was the core of what I built. And I think that if I take away other things that we did, I don't think it would have had as much impact as if we take away the culture that we built. And it was right from the beginning. Culture is something you've got to build from the beginning, and it's got to be very intentional. And I remember when I think that I'm proud to say we got sort of known for our culture, and it helped us with attracting talent and everything. When COVID happened and everybody started working from home, quite a few people came to me going, you build a good culture. How do we build a good culture? I was like, it's too late. I mean, it's not too late, but I mean, you've not done it while you're in the office. You're going to try do it now. So culture is at the heart of everything for me. I think it is so important. But I think that within culture, you've got leadership have got to be the ones that are driving that culture. It can't be your culture is this and my culture is this. But I think that culture expands into lots of areas. The way I lead is around culture. I'm like compassionate leadership and mindful leadership and those kind of things, but that also drives culture. So it's hard to say anything that isn't culture that is important. But one thing that I realized very soon was at Sales Loft, which I think had a big impact on our success, was that because we're selling to sales leaders, I believed we had to give the best sales experience anyone's ever had. And I think that normally when you're selling a product, you're being judged as a salesperson and you're being judged on the product you're selling. We were also being judged on the sales process. And so many companies that bought from us, the VP or the CRO would contact me after saying, we bought from you because the sales process was the best we've ever seen. Can you tell us how you did this, how you did that? I mean, I've got to put my hands up. A lot of it was down to Andy White, who wrote the Medic book, not actually defined Medic in the beginning, but he helped me train the team. We all read his book, etc. And we built a very good sales process. And I think that was core to our success as well. But if you take the process, and one of the core values at LinkedIn was demand excellence. I demand excellence of people to make sure they are doing everything that we need to do. And if they're accountable for what they do and they are living up to demanding excellence, then I can concentrate on their happiness and we're all happy. So when you put all of those together with the best processes, you've built a very good team. You build a very good team.
I absolutely love this. I always love to talk about culture because I find it such a complex concept to navigate. I think it's just about, people not knowing what sales engagement platform means at the beginning. I feel like people still today don't really know how to put words to what a culture is. So I love the fact that you are quite feeling comfortable with that. I absolutely love the idea of you have to build it from the beginning. It's never too early to start with the foundation, with the heart of an organization. If you maybe have to define for anyone that, you kind of did already with the example of how you actually, let's say, made culture reality inside Sales Loft. But if you would have to define culture or give like a couple of key questions that people should ask themselves to kind of, make culture a reality or to have that as a priority inside the organization and to also make sure that, they are being very prudent about the culture. Like, what are the key things that you can think of? How would you define it? Like to really get like that good grasp of what is a culture?
I mean, a culture, the way that I think about it, I mean, LinkedIn used to have their culture and their values. And there was a list of these culture and values, two separate lists. But what Mike Gamson used to talk about, it's the way, it helps you define the way that we act and the way that we think and the way that we handle situations. And I think that's an interesting way of thinking about it because really behind it, the core should be really about your values. And I always think it's a very good exercise for a sales leader to define their own values. So mine are very much around fairness, etc. And I think that I know that I want to everything I do, I want to make sure aligns with my values. So when you're thinking about a company's culture and values, then it should define the way that you're acting and the way that you handle situations, whether it's externally or internally. And it should make you proud of the actions you take. And I think that when you think a bit about it like that, I do see a lot of companies that on paper, their culture, their values, whatever they want to say, are written, but do they live up to it? And sometimes I believe they're written in a way that is a little bit ambiguous, that people don't really understand it. And that needs to come from leadership to explain them. And it's no good standing on stage and just rattling them off, all 7 of them over and over again. It's about talking about them and celebrating people that act with those values. So the easier to understand the actual listed values or core values, whatever you want to call them, easy to understand, live by them from leadership down, and celebrate them, I think are three things that are right. And I think that if they're driving a behavior, if someone has a behavior that is aligned with your values and it's not the right behavior, then your values aren't right. And I think that that's an important way of thinking about it.
Absolutely love that. Also, you also mentioned that it is the way that you act, the way that you think. I also look at culture as kind of the silent expectation of behavior, right? Something that you don't have to keep repeating and repeating, and somehow people are acting and thinking in a certain way. Obviously, you need that repetition to make sure that, once in a while you have to repeat, or maybe you cannot repeat it enough, probably. But it's that concept of probably not even needing to mention it again, and people are actually, following that path in some way.
Yeah, I agree. But what we've also got to realize is that as people, we're all individuals and we're all different. And I think that culture, just because one culture is right for me, it doesn't mean it's right for everybody. And it's very much like your friends. We're not all friends with the same people. So I think that culture, as long as we're not, culture to me, I think you do have maybe a small area where it's bad cultures and great cultures, but a lot of the time it's just that, is the culture right for the person? And sometimes it's not. And sometimes a culture could be great for one person and not for another. And we shouldn't really just go, that's a bad culture, unless there's certain bad things happening that are bad for the people within it. I think it's often just that culture is not right for me. And I think that we've got to understand what we want from a culture as individuals, rather than just thinking that's not a good culture.
I like that. It's not because indeed you have that high pressured environment that it makes it a bad culture. Because if that is, you can have like the low back culture where, happiness is the most important thing and everybody is happy at the organization, low pressure, everything. But then you can have like the high pressured organization where excellence is the key rule and everybody knows it. Everybody will act accordingly. But then also you will build probably bigger things. I mean, depending on the context, right? And if that is what you want, then that is fine. And then it doesn't make it a bad culture. So I kind of follow you there. Ollie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I would still love to end this interview with maybe you sharing a last anecdote of maybe a challenge that you had to face, a failure that you had to go through, something, that other people might actually face as well, and that you could kind of enlighten them before that has to happen. Is there anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I've made lots of mistakes, and I spoke about one earlier, and I've spoken about it before, just about the way I built a team in the past. I think what I would talk about my mistakes is the mistakes I made when I first went into management. I think that everything else is a gradual transition to develop as a leader. I think the biggest change anyone goes through is going from an IC into a management role, and you're probably managing people that you used to be colleagues with. You've stepped up into this role. You very rarely get good management training. So, and at that stage, and I've already mentioned a few, I made lots of mistakes, and including building a team that everyone was very, very similar and very similar to me. Including thinking that I knew everything and didn't need other people's point of view because I was a top salesperson. So why do I need to listen to other people? They were the main two. And also just the way that I managed. I think I managed it with some empathy, but maybe not as empathetic or compassionate as I am now as a lead. That's where I've developed a lot. But I also assumed everyone was doing the same as what I was doing as a salesperson. So I had assumptions about people, and I was going, why aren't you doing that? And I was surprised why not. So going into leadership, if you're moving into leadership or an early stage leader, know the strength of, we have bias of hiring people similar to us. Get rid of that bias. Think about having a diverse team. Think about as a leader, it's about empowering your people to have their view and listening to them and making sure that we're going forward as a team with everyone's ideas. Don't think that you can be blinkered and not listen to other people. And also just make sure that you don't assume everyone is doing certain things certain ways. And the chances are they may be doing things better than you did anyway. But it's about understanding how they do it and how to improve them. So that's how bad a leader I was at the beginning. And that's the biggest mistakes I made in leadership. I've made quite a few since as well, but that was the biggest learning curve, I think, going into leadership.
That is super, super interesting. And I feel that we with We Are Sales, we definitely need to help actually aspiring leaders or newly fresh leaders in that transition. So thanks to enlighten this challenge to me as well. Ollie, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your experience. I also loved the little turn that we took at the very beginning about well-being in sales, well-being at work in general. I think it's not a concept that should be forgotten at all. So if anyone wants to maybe know more about that, wants to have a discussion with you or just, follow you, where would you like to send them to?
This place called LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn, obviously, and there's a lot of my talks on LinkedIn. If you look at the bit across the top, featured, I think it is. There's talks I've done about mental well-being in sales, and there's a post I did about building a culture and thinking about mental well-being. So there is a lot on my profile anyway about mental well-being, and there's companies I advise like Sales Psyche that work in this space. So yeah, there's a lot on my LinkedIn profile about it, and that's where I spend a bit of my time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ollie. I wish you nothing but the best, and see you next time.
Thank you, Dylan. Cheers.
That's it. We have once again reached the end of an episode. I just really appreciate you all spending the time. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Until next week with a fresh new episode.